States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Cindy, ball is to you.
Good evening. So the process today, first I'm going to go through the basics of budgeting for those of you that are new to the process. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ross, and he's going to give you some information, and then we're going to discuss priorities. So, as we're going, if you have questions, please stop me and ask me at the time. All right, so we have the basics of budgeting. So, we have multiple funds. The first fund that we're going to talk about is the general fund, and the revenues in that fund. We get our revenues from different sources for different funds. In the general fund, it consists of taxes, license and permits, intergovernmental, which is state and other governments, fines and forfeitures, investment income, and then miscellaneous. We have several miscellaneous categories that go under that. Under taxes, that includes property taxes, and the only way to increase property taxes is by a vote. Town and county sales tax, that also requires a vote to increase it. Franchise tax is increased. Let's be real. You can increase or decrease this way, but let's be real. We're looking at increases. So franchise tax can be done by agreement. Cigarette tax is done through the Department of Revenue and set by the Department of Revenue. Other tax disbursements by the Delta County is the specific ownership tax, delinquent taxes, and interest on delinquent taxes. Any questions about any of those so far?
Do the audience get to ask questions, or?
I might as well.
Can I just ask about the franchise tax? Is that the same as the franchise fee, or is that different? What's the franchise tax?
Same thing.
It's
So
the same.
how can you charge sales tax on a franchise tax?
You don't.
We don't charge sales tax on a franchise fee for getting it.
Sales taxes on the commodity, either the MCF of gas or a kilowatt hour of energy.
I'll show you.
Franchise fees apply to the same thing.
I'll show you what I'm talking about later, if you don't mind. Thanks.
I'm going
Michelle?
to say that side of it doesn't apply to us.
Okay.
Michelle had a question.
Go ahead.
Also on franchise taxes, when it says increase by agreement, who does that include? Who has to agree?
Right now, we have agreements with DMEA, Elevate, Black Hills, Charter,
Okay, thank you.
CDS. Any other questions? Okay. The next category is license and permits, and these are all set by fee schedule. Liquor license, building permits, miscellaneous permits, and special review. Intergovernmental, which is state and other governments, that's our highway users tax, motor vehicle fees, severance tax, mineral leasing, motor vehicle licensing, grants, and road and bridge. Then we have fines and forfeitures, and this is the revenue that the police department generates. These the court fees are going to, are collected by the district court, and that's where they come from. Our police fines, that's our tickets and municipal court internally. Grant revenue, any grants that we apply for that are PD related, or if post reimburse, they have a reimbursement program, and if we participate in that, then that's also considered PD grant funds. Bin inspections and miscellaneous things like dog tags are
Yeah.
fees and forfeitures.
Yeah. I just wanted to know what is the cost for a bin inspection?
It's a regular bin inspection is $10, a certified bin inspection is $25.
Get a bill?
Do we actually get money back from the court fines administered by the district court?
We do,
We're kicked back into the fund
sometimes.
sometimes based on what?
I can't answer that. We'll have to ask Neil. I think it depends on the tickets that we send to district court and what they collect on their end. And they just send, we just get a check from them, and we don't have anything to check it against. We just say thank you. Anything else? Our investment income right now just comes strictly from interest. We earn interest on some of our accounts that are at United Business Bank, and then we also have 4 accounts that are with Cola Trust, and those were paying a much higher interest rate. Now the bank is paying a much higher interest rate, which is to say next to nothing. Our miscellaneous fees that we receive, late charges on our utilities, that actually comes into the general fund to pay for, and the reason that that's been done in the past is to pay for the cost of collecting utilities from the general fund area. So the late charges have always gone to the general fund. Other income is like if somebody makes a copy, or we do a fax for them, or an email, that would be other income. Refund of expenditures, that is anything that we're getting refunded from a prior year. So an example is we get a rebate from CML each year for the previous year, and that goes into refund of expenditures. Or CIRSA does an audit on our work comp, and that refund goes to refund of expenditures. Restitution is anybody that's been ordered restitution to the town. At this particular time, that would be the Chestnut restitution. Rents and royalties is any time that we rent this room, or anywhere in this building, or the parks. Contributions, anything that the outside public gives us a contribution for a particular project, that goes through there. And impact fees is where the enterprise funds are basically paying the general fund a franchise fee for the damage that they do to the roads, water, sewer, trash. And the impact fee is to offset the impact of those utilities on the town's infrastructure. So the general fund consists of administration, building, PD, streets, and parks. The enterprise fund is water, sewer, and trash. And then we have specialty funds, and those are going to be conservation trust, in capital improvement, and space to create, anything like that sidewalk fund, anything that has its own purpose will be set up as a specialty fund. Any questions? So the general fund expenditures include the general government, which is administration and building, public safety, public works, which is street, sidewalks, bridge, capital improvement, and then culture and recreation, which is parks. The expenditure categories that you're going to be looking at are salaries, supplies, professional fees, insurance, utilities, other operating expenditures, and discretionary spending. So one of the categories is administrative payroll. So the administrative payroll is going to include all of us that are in the office. And that is funded by allocating salaries at the time of budget. So each administrative person, their salaries are allocated between 5 and 20% of their salary is coming out of administrative payroll. The building is 2 to 5% is of administrative salaries is being paid by building. 2 to 5% of the salaries are being paid by streets. 2 to 5% of administrative is coming from parks. And then the 30 to 40 is water, 30 to 35 is sewer, and trash is 12 to 15. And what determines that for the most part is how much time we spend in those categories. And so I keep track of payroll by department, by what they're working on. Then I also we know how much time we're spending each day on those different categories. So between those, we come to a reconciliation of those ranges as to who pays for administrative payroll. Does that make sense? Yeah.
What system do you use to keep track of that? How do you keep track?
Castell does it, our software. Public safety and the judge is all paid by public safety. And public works salaries are split up between streets, parks, water, sewer, and trash. We got 5 people that their salaries come from streets, parks, and trash, and 2 people that are paid out of water and sewer. Any questions? Council's payroll is divided depending on, so the mayor and the 2 committee members that make up the Public Works Committee gets paid out of water and sewer, and the rest, everybody else gets paid out of administration. So payroll includes wages, taxes, and then benefits. And the benefits right now include health insurance, dental, vision, disability coverage, life insurance, a 2 to 5% retirement contribution, and then a cell phone allowance. And the payroll pre-budget, will run about 28.6% of the budget. The payroll goals for budgeting is to set staffing levels for y'all to decide where you are comfortable with the staffing levels, the pay ranges, and any additional benefits that you want to offer. Operating expenditures generally are based on previous year's experience and any known or estimates that anything we know that we need to include will get added into that. So it's supplies, professional fees, insurance, utilities, and other operating expenditures makes up the operating expenditures. Discretionary spending includes cultural events, and anything you want to do there. Previous items that have gone into that are the sign program, the our the person that when we did that cultural event that was the philanthropy days. Those are some examples of what we fall under cultural events. Human services are donations that we give to some of the areas, nonprofit, and that would include like the seniors. It'll include partners. It has included in the past. Yeah, the senior bus and stuff like that. And then all the other discretionary spending, and it's only part of its discretionary spending is the repairs and maintenance. The actual repairs and maintenance is a operating expense. The discretionary part is anything that we do to improve the system. So it's more of the capital part of repairs and maintenance. Questions?
Yeah, Cindy,
Yes.
so repairs and maintenance, that also is something like car blows up or something like that is not in the budget, correct?
Yes.
So, yeah, would that also include like the upgrades to the office and to town hall, or where was that?
The upgrades to town hall came out of capital improvement because it was an improvement to an asset. So our budget goals are what do you want to see in the budget? That's what we're going to try and narrow down as much as possible, is what you want to see in the budget and what your priorities are. And then from there, we're going to see how much money we have to pay for those things. What donations you want to make and what projects you want to accomplish next year. Eventually, and we're working very hard toward this, is to be planning further ahead than 1 year. Right now, we're just looking at next year. But at some point, when we get done with these studies, we want to be able to project 3 to 5 years out, so that we can plan. So like a perfect example is the water system. We're going to plan that out over each year for 5 years, so we know this year we're doing these items, the next year we're doing these items, and so that we have a plan and we know, so we can be working on funding now for 3 years from now, not now for next year. Because it's hard to throw that all together in that short of a period of time because of the cycles and such. And and then if we're doing it, then, and we don't get the money, then we're gonna have to try again next year, so that throws the whole process off and delays things further. And then, we're gonna go through what your priorities are.
So Cindy, when you say, when the studies get done, is that like the inventory analysis and things like that that are happening now?
Yes.
So the anticipation is that when we're looking at the 2022 budget, we should have more information to plan out a longer term.
Yes, we'll be able to plan out further than just next year.
Okay, thank you.
Our enterprise funds, like I said before, are water, sewer, and trash. Our revenue in that category comes from the sale of those services, standby fees, sales and services, which is like shut-off fees, and any, like if we sell a meter or something like that, any penalties, interest, rents on those properties that we own, tap sales, and then grant revenue. And our our expenditures, you'll notice are similar: salaries, supplies, professional fees, insurance, utilities, debt service, other operating expenditures, and discretionary spending. So our discretionary spending under those are going to be our legal, our engineering, and the repairs and maintenance. And that's where that's where we're trying to get so that we can plan out for 5 years rather than planning on an emergency basis. And again, our goals are what projects we want to complete, what vehicles and equipment need to be purchased and or replaced and purchased, and what our priorities are, and whether we need to do any fee increases to cover these things. And then our specialty funds is the sidewalk space to create, conservation trust fund, and capital improvement. Sidewalk fees come from the utility bill. They pay a $3 per month sidewalk fee for each person that lives in the town limits, and that goes into a fund to repair current sidewalks. Space to Create is funded by grant revenue, and that's currently in a holding pattern until the state decides what they're going to do with it. Conservation Trust comes from lottery funds, and that can only be used for park improvements. And there's a list online under Conservation Trust that gives us detail of what we can. We're very limited on what we can spend those funds on. So that is dictated by the state. And then capital improvement is our 1% sales tax that we use for capital improvement vehicles and equipment. Any questions?
Is there a sunset for the sidewalk fee?
There is.
When is that?
It's the last day of December 2024.
So the budget goals for those are projects and priorities for those funds.
If the marijuana passes, where does that fit? If the marijuana revenue passes, where does that fit?
So you have indicated to me that you're only going to be allowing it to be used on street capital. So that will go to the street capital improvement. Any questions? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Ross for his insight, comments, and
Thank you, Cindy. I don't know if all of you have had a chance to review a short memorandum that I asked Cindy to provide each of you. I will tell you that budgeting is as much an art as it is a science. Based on Cindy's experience in past budgets and how we receive our funds and how our expenditures are going, is a lot of interpretation. And this memorandum that I provided you is strictly food for thought. Obviously, it's not something that you would pursue verbatim, but it would ask you to just give some thought to different aspects of our budgeting activity, because today we need to have macro indicators from the board so that it allows the staff, our administrator and our finance director and the department heads to prepare a preliminary budget that will be presented to you on September 8th. So we need to get your input tonight and as quickly as possible after tonight, to the extent that anything else comes to your mind. If you go through my little memo, these are things that I've mentioned some years past. I've been doing this now for the town. This is my 10th year in budgeting. Exercise of pre-annexation agreements and annexed properties receiving benefits of town services. I know this has been a subject that a lot of the board of trustees thought about. They've never directed the staff or the town attorney to pursue it. It's something that I think you need to think about. The next one, review fines and fees. Obviously, you know, in certain areas, building inspections, for example, those need to be reviewed in context of the demands they're placing on town resources. There was a lot of debate last year on creating business license ordinance. Of course, you've got the cannabis issue that's under consideration and going to be on the ballot in November. Increase in millage. This is strictly an increase in revenues that would be of permanent nature, but obviously you'd have to take that to a vote of the people, and you'd have to determine the need for those revenues that you could justify with the community. And there's also the ideas of establishing special improvement districts and business improvement districts, which is something that the board may or may not ask the Government Affairs Committee to investigate. I know that our staff has been diligent in asking our property owners to pay their sidewalk fee and to make sure that all property owners are doing so. Mr. Knudsen just brought up the issue of the sunsetting provision of our sidewalk ordinance. And in 2024, it will be sunsetted unless the board determines that we should ask the citizenry to continue it. And I would suggest also that the board consider expanding the applicability of that fee to not only just existing sidewalks, but at that time, new sidewalks that might be needed or desired in the community. Under the general fund expenses, I know the Finance and Personnel Committee has been diligently monitoring salary and wage levels and to ensure competitive compensation and with appropriate benefits. We're all aware of where we are with the street lighting project, and of course it needs to be completed. And of course, to the extent that our town administrator is working with property owners on impacts of certain facilities, that will be on the agenda until I assume that's completed and to the satisfaction of all property owners. These are things that have been talked about when we had Evan here. It was nice because we had kind of a survey or a grant writer. The research on the pedestrian bridge or a new bridge at Samuel Road might be a priority that people think we should pursue. Budgeting for engineering expertise, which I defer to Mr. Lober, in that he might find it beneficial to have that type of resource available to him to complete his projects. And I know that there have been numerous members of the board that have talked about economic development funds to pursue. Mr. Linder, I know specifically has referenced that. And I think our Governmental Affairs Committee is presently looking at a VRBO ordinance, the thought of one, along with the food vendor licensing conditions. And I think these are two good things that ought to be looked at. When we start talking about the enterprise funds, there is going to be a big decision made by this board when it comes to the raw water supply to the town, the 2 million gallon storage facility, and I think you're going to have to look at a whole combination of things from grants to loans, probably revenue bonds, to the increase in fees to be able to support the capital expenditure that you're going to have to anticipate. I offer a couple other options here. It may be that the old wastewater treatment plant site could be a revenue source. And of course, we did that with the sewer system when we disposed of the excess property of the new sewer plant. And you now have approximately $550,000 in reserves to be used for sewer facilities. It seems to me that maybe you could use this wastewater treatment plant for the same thing for the water system. To get to the enterprise funds expenses, I know Mr. Lober will be presenting to the town, to the Public Works Committee, Mr. Baird, the cost of raw water storage, collection system for raw water, and necessary facilities to provide that feed into our 2 million gallon facility. And then there's going to be the refurbishment of the 2 million gallon reservoir. It's going to be a big effort for the Public Works Committee. I would also add that along with that, make sure that you have the cathodic protection in that tank to minimize any future corrosion or erosion of the containment vessel. There might be another opportunity. I'm not sure that it's viable, but I was thinking and talking with Ms. Jones about investigating the ability to borrow from our restricted funds. To what extent you might be able to do that, because you do have certain restricted funds with the county on the road, Samuel Way Road Bridge. You have restricted funds from the wastewater treatment plant property sales, and there are a couple others that you might want to look at leveraging so that you could finance whatever capital expenditures, and especially get back to this water issue in the future. And I've already mentioned the review of sidewalk funding and its plan for renewal. It's going to be here sooner than you think. And one thing I mentioned every year, and we've never done it, but I would like to recommend to the board that you schedule some kind of a celebratory event that recognizes the accomplishments of this board and previous boards. There has been so many things that have been done of a positive nature for this town. I think this board and the community deserves to have some accolades for stepping up and doing it. We have suffered through some tough times 10 years. And I think it's time that you guys got credit for it. And other than opening it up for discussion, I'd like to suggest that right now we need to get your input from a macro point of view that will allow Mrs. Ferguson and Mrs. Jones to prepare that preliminary budget that you want to review on this 8th of September. Let's open it up for questions.
Yeah, Ross, I do have a question for you.
Sure.
Would you talk a little bit about special improvement districts, what that means, and how those are structured?
Well, I'm not a lawyer or anything, but I've been involved in communities that have formed special improvement districts, and they're either single or dual or multi-purpose districts that are put in place for specific uses or specific activities within a particular district. You can have, reference a municipal district. The municipal district is almost as powerful as a municipality. And you can have them where they would take care of storm drainage, they could do sidewalk improvements, they could do street lighting, they could do almost anything that the municipality would do. It would only apply to the district in which was requesting those services. And I don't know that there's a limit on the type of services that you could have, but those people within it, through either property tax or fees or whatever, however the revenue is generated, to support the expenditure that accomplished whatever services they wanted, that would be what a special district would do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I have another question, if nobody else has it. Can you explain a little bit more about what cathodic protection is on the water tank?
I'm sorry?
Cathodic.
Cool, cathodic protection.
Yeah.
This is a technique that pipelines, gas pipelines, water pipelines, major cross-country pipelines, gas pipelines employ to minimize the corrosive nature of electrostatic, come on, Billy, electrostatic interaction with the metal in the pipe so it doesn't corrode. It takes that, whatever current might be generated within the metal and sends it to ground, so you do not have that corrosive effect. Gas pipelines have been using it for decades. I know water pipelines. I'm sure most of the coal mines around here, all their infrastructure, they probably put cathodic protection on it to ensure that it increases the life of the facility.
Thank you.
Is that similar to the beneficial animal in your water heater? Is it kind of, so we all
Similar.
have it in our water heater, sometimes very similar.
It's a similar concept, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
This might be a question for you or Cindy. There are at least 3 measures on this year's ballot, state ballot, that do with various taxes. Would any of those measures have a strong impact on the budget for next year if they pass or no?
Going back to that.
So if you're talking about like our marijuana question,
No, I mean,
Back to back.
there's a nicotine tax on the ballot for 2020 for the
A what?
state. A nicotine tax.
hold on.
Nicotine, yeah.
I would guess that would be the increase to the cigarette tax.
Okay, well, between that, the property tax, and then state income tax change are all up for vote statewide. Would any of those have a significant impact on next year's budget? Do you
The
think?
back-to-back absolutely will.
Okay.
I'm gonna say the cigarette tax will have a very minimal impact. We only get about 100 to, tops out maybe at 125 a month, $120 or $100 to $125 a month is all we get. So that's a very minor impact. I don't see that, even if it went up $100, it's not gonna be a major impact for us. And I'll have to look into those other ones.
What was the other one you mentioned?
There's, the three that I saw just off, and were nicotine for like e-liquids, e-cigarettes, property tax assessment change, and then state income tax change as well.
The property tax is through the state assessor's office, and what it would do would require then the counties to go and reevaluate all their properties based on whatever new rules they came up with. I wasn't aware that they were addressing that this year. That could have an impact on the community.
Yeah, it looks like, basically, they're saying they won't increase the property tax rates, but, they're considering repealing the requirement that General Assembly periodically change the residential assessment rate in order to maintain statewide proportion of residential property compared to other taxable property.
I know what that referencing, that's the alley where
Yeah, the alley.
they're trying to amend that to make it more equitable on commercial and industrial property.
Yeah.
So that not all the tax burdens go to the commercial and industrial, and it's more shared with residential. Because right now, the residential properties keep declining, while commercial, as you know, commercial and industrial property is increasing exponentially.
And so I'm gonna say the impact on that, if that does pass, is gonna be about a $30,000 impact. We'll lose about 30,000. If it passes. If it passes. If they are able to repeal it and bring back that will back it down to where it was, and we've been running about 100,000 until they did the new assessment for last year, which bumped it up about 33,000. So that's where I'm saying that it's gonna have about a $30,000 impact.
Depending on, I don't know if we can get it approved.
Right.
Most commercial and industrial businesses don't vote.
And it takes
Residential do.
it'll take 2 years for that to, hit us, because there's a 2-year lag on that. Once they pass it, then assess it, then start paying it. So, we'll have time to adjust our budgets, to whatever that new rule is, because it won't be next year. It won't have an effect on next year.
Cool, thank you.
I just was wondering, was there a different state sales tax for marijuana sales, or is it the same as the general sales tax? Do they tax it at a different rate than?
Marijuana does get taxed at a different rate than, it depends on the county where it's being sold.
So what's the tax rate for our county and state?
I don't think our county is.
Do they-
I don't think that-
So the state doesn't collect any more than, they don't give anything back to us?
Right now, we don't get any marijuana revenue at all.
Yeah, but if they collect the taxes, it's not like they're collecting 18%, and then splitting that up instead of 7.9% or whatever, or 8.3%,
No.
okay.
No, we don't get, unless it's coming through some other mechanism, but we don't get
I mean, if it were
a state
to-
sales tax.
Okay, but I mean, if there were stores here.
If there were stores here, then we would get the revenue, the sales tax revenue from their sales.
Okay. And it's the same as like going to Don's Market, and it's the same tax rate.
No, it won't be, it's not likely to be the same tax rate, it'll be a higher tax rate.
Okay.
As of beginning of this year, the state imposes a 15% tax on the sale of marijuana from cultivator to retailer and a 15% sales tax.
And that's just for the state, they don't give that back then? is it?
Right.
Okay.
And there's nothing in our county.
They could be dispersing it through, they could be using it to fund the highway users tax, they could be using it to fund, like, Conservation Trust is funded by lottery funds. So they have different mechanisms that so we're not getting it as, we have, so like, one mechanism we are getting is marijuana enforcement money, and that probably comes from that pool. And that comes as agreement. Go ahead.
Kind of fun. So if back the badge passes, how much would pay when we get from the county?
Well, that's fluid, but we're estimating about 150,000.
And
It'll be set 6%. They've agreed on 6%,
0.8% is what they're asking.
and we get 6% of that total.
And then the town won't have to put in for that? It just, you have the police budget and that will go into the police budget, so it's something that the town then won't have to pay 150,000, or is it added?
It's added, it
So-
has to be added
Okay.
to what we are currently using to fund our police department.
Okay, thank you.
As in, we can't take it away from the police department to use it somewhere else and then subsidize it with that. We have to maintain what we are currently spending for the police department, and that is that will add to. Does that make sense?
Do you mean that you can never change, like, decrease the amount of funding to the police department if we set back to the badge fees? Like, if ours is at 33%, a third of our taxes go to the police department, and we say, well, you know, we need to start spending more on the streets, so we've got to do some cuts here, get rid of an officer, or whatever. Are we locked into a certain amount of spending now forever with that the badge?
No, the police department budget would change, you know, within reason, with moderation, just like it does year to year. The police department budget was lower this year for 2020 than it was in 2019. Their modifications are made. What protection they did put in there was that they weren't going to pass a county tax that then provided, say, $150,000 to the town, at which point the town then took $150,000 away that they'd already been budgeting.
So we're responsible. Yeah, okay.
Okay, let's, did you really want to?
I was just going to ask the board if they have any direction that they would provide to the administration relative to, one, staffing levels, two, for planning purposes, not for final approval, but for planning purposes, should the staff include a 1%, 2%, or 3% increase in salaries and/or gross benefits? Are you thinking that there are certain other activities that the staff should anticipate and put in their projections? Or are you satisfied with them building their preliminary budget recommendations based on last year's performance for you to review on the 8th?
In addition to that, last year, we went through a tedious process of looking at CML's salary survey of all the communities that report in Colorado and determined a salary range. And then this year we went through that similar process, and the goal was to get our employees into those ranges and to the proper place in those ranges. And I need feedback and confirmation that you guys want to continue, since it's a new board, in that same direction.
This year's data wasn't nearly as robust as last year's data. We had a lot of small towns that did not report this year, so it was really hard to look through the data and determine what's there and what wasn't. It was almost, 800 pages or something? It was just crazy how much data they did, and there was no analysis. They just throw all these numbers at you. So, when we looked, like last year, for instance, we felt the police were really underpaid. We tried to bring them up into the range, and we thought that also with public works. And we established some pretty reasonable ranges, I think, from last year. I think Karen would agree agree with me on that. So to me, the goal would be to get the employees within those ranges because we still didn't get them all within the range. So, for me, it's really important that people be paid fairly for the work that they're doing. And I think getting into those ranges would be a big step.
Yeah, Karen.
The other thing, as far as personnel is concerned, we did have Eric last year, and it was a great benefit. We wouldn't have had master plan work, or, a lot of things that he did, and grants and things. And I would like to propose that we put a position in our budget for, I don't know what you want to call it, but some sort of administrative grant writer person who can do what we need to do to get more funds in, and et cetera.
And we haven't removed that position, unless we are given that direction moving forward, but it is still in there, yeah.
Okay. Nick?
Was Evan actually a Vista worker?
He started.
He started as Vista and then he was hired? Okay. And also, I'd like to say, I think I certainly want to be fair with our staff, but I think we need to know how much money we have too. Do we have any idea how COVID has affected our sales tax receipts this year?
At this time, as of this month, our sales tax has increased 14% over last year.
For the year or just
Year to date,
year to date?
internet sales.
Yeah.
Actually,
Great.
we have 3 businesses in town, 3 or 4 businesses in town that are, their business has increased significantly, and that actually is part of our increase, the reason of our increase.
Great.
Michelle?
Yeah, I was also curious about the Vista program and whether that's still available and something that the town could pursue, since we had great success with it. Evan?
Not through the same program.
I, for one, would like, prior to talking about salaries, to see what kind of income the town is expecting next year. We're going to have enough income to cover everything. And, we're going to have to increase fees. Because last year, in addition to raising salaries, we also had significant rate increases, especially in the water and the sewer. So those were big expenses for people to digest. So rather than moving directly into salary levels, I'd like to see what the income level is going to be for next year.
Yeah, Karen.
And also, I wanted to add about, even if the marijuana thing passes, it should go into effect maybe January, it'll take us a year to get regulations and get established. So I don't think we should look for any income, or very little income from that, if it passes.
Well, something that I would say is, as far as since we're just throwing ideas out there, we're not actually creating the budget at this point in time, I would like to see a tiered raise for the employees. Make sure that they're within their ranges in an appropriate place. And if that means increasing their salary, then fine. But for those that are appropriately within their range, doing a cost of living increase, I think, would be really nice. So again, dream, and again, in the end, it'll be how much we have to spend, whether we can do that or not. But since we're throwing out dreams right now, that's my dream.
I would just like to point out to the board, the budget that would be presented to you on the 8th of September is preliminary. Nothing is set in concrete, but there has to be parameters established that will allow the staff to put that budget together. So if I hear Mr. Bear's comment, I think what he's saying is that he wants to see in that preliminary budget where our revenues are. If in fact there's, and for planning purposes, a nominal sum included for increase in salaries, wages, and benefits for the employees, that would be included. And at that point, you would see where it all falls out before you have to make a decision on whether you say, no, we're not gonna go with a 3% increase or a COLA increase or just a nominal increase. You're gonna have to adjust a lot of different things before you get to that final budget. So I want to assure you that whatever the staff puts together, it is strictly preliminary in nature, and you're going to get a chance to review it and make judgments accordingly on the assumptions that they put into it.
Yeah.
Two things. One was, I was disappointed that we didn't finish our website upgrade and the general plan, and both of those were on Evan's plate, when he was leaving. And it seems to me those things fall right within the skill set of a person that's trying to graduate from a Master's of Public Administration program. And typically those programs, people go into paid internships right after they graduate. They don't have a lot of experience. So we could not have to pay a full professional salary, but we could get a professional that could go after those things. That goes into the point of the town manager, and I'd like to see those things done. It was really disappointing when we tried to apply for grants and things that plan isn't done. So that's one thing. And then the second question is for our treasurer on this ability to borrow from restricted funds. I wonder how that works as far as interest payments. Could we, in other words, it seems like there would be a huge advantage because we could borrow from ourselves and save the interest costs of some of the borrowing we're doing. Is that a correct assumption?
I would like to think that's in fact the case, but I don't know that that's within our capability. When we worked with the federal government on the receipts of the land sale for the wastewater treatment plant, they specifically said that those funds had to be used for wastewater projects to include collection and treatment facilities. We never asked them the question, well, can we lever those funds to where we could borrow them or use them for other projects and pay it back. I would like to think we could. Again, I don't know. And this is why I would suggest that you authorize the staff to pursue that idea with our town attorney and ask him if he could investigate it.
Yeah, well,
You mentioned the sale of the old wastewater treatment plant. Does the town have other properties that could potentially be sold? And it would be a ready source of revenue that wouldn't cost us anything.
I'm going to ask Mrs. Ferguson to help me here because I only know two properties. There's one out below Land's End, if I'm not mistaken, a lot that we somehow have ownership of. I don't know how we got it. It might be disposed of. The wastewater treatment plant. There may be additional lands at the wastewater plant site that aren't needed, but I would know that Mr. Loberg would want to do that because there's going to be a day where we're going to expand it.
So I'm also thinking of the old half-million-gallon tank.
Absolutely, excuse me. I do know where that is what I would think a possibility for sale.
There are, the town owns several different lots and pieces of property. We just need to look at them and see what they're tied to as far as any of our infrastructure. And of course, any sale from them at this time would be a reduced value because the majority of them do not have water to them and would be eligible for water to develop. And so to answer that question, also to go back to Trustee Knudsen, to your point, I do want to say that the website didn't stop because Evan isn't here. Evan was tasked to be the primary point of contact with SIPA, but we have continued and shifted that primary contact, and that's under works and it's actually being built to date. Evan did substantial, so in the conversations I've had with some other town administrators and managers, the information and that I gleaned from them is that while really good work and really good bones, some good meat to the master plan update process came out of what was done by Evan while he was with us, and very appreciative of that. But it is not complete to the expectation that one would have if you had a professional grant writer, master plan writer. And it was recommended that when the town is looking at internships and programs like that, you're not utilizing that kind of assistance for plans that are of such important nature and really drive the direction of your decisions and your community for a substantial period of time. To be frank, they really said you get what you pay for, and that's not something that you want to necessarily try to cut corners on. So that was the feedback I did receive. And on that note, I was going to report out later on it. I am going to reach out to a consultant that's done some master plan writing for Delta County, also the one who drafted the master plan for the Highway 132 corridor for the town, and provide him the data that Evan collected, data that's collected on the previous draft master plan update and our existing, and try to get an idea of what it would cost if we were to look at grant expenditures or town expenditures to get that process completed.
That's a priority. Yes, Suzanne.
The town of Oshkosh updated their master plan, and it was really inexpensive. And I know Tom Wells has a lot of experience with that. Maybe there are more local sources that we could find that to bring the cost down. One thing I was wondering is, I don't know if you've looked at attorney's fees, but could we possibly see curbed a little bit this coming year? And as tomorrow, there'll be a discussion about this, but I really think you could have me decreasing the building inspection fees by looking at the secret service that you're hiring. So, I have a lot of respect for what Treasurer King has put forward. I haven't seen it here in front of you, just notes. But I'd like to see if there are cost-cutting measures we can take instead of just talk about fee increases. And then also in regards to what Trustee Bear was saying about looking at the budget. I don't know. I know when I was on the board, we had a budget retreat, and we talked about things that we wanted to see accomplished in the town, what we wanted to spend money on. And in a way, you kind of need to know what the projects that you want to reach for and the costs of it are before you even know what your labor requirements are and what your staffing levels need to be. It seems that there was quite a bit of staff hiring that happened last year, so we're pretty well staffed. I don't know if any positions were reclassified or rewritten, because I think some of them divided their responsibilities and gave them to another employee. So now, but I don't know if there were any salary adjustments because of that. So it would be kind of interesting, it's a difficult job to look at, but to see if there's any shifting around that can be done and cost-cutting measures.
I would like to just remind the board, to my knowledge, you've always been very sensitive to the fact that we just don't want to spend money, we want to save money where possible. And the one big one that I can say for the year 2020 was when the board finally made the decision on street lighting. You decreased the expenses for street lighting approximately $8,000, and it could be even more, depending on what your decision is on some of the replacement lights that you're not satisfied with. So it isn't just spending more money, they are looking at every opportunity to save expenses also.
And the refinancing bonds is $300,000.
That's another excellent example, that's correct. Over the 20-year life of the bonds, we're going to save about $30,000 a year. Or excuse me, $15,000 a year.
Right. And with renewal of the and staying with our town attorney, part of that conversation as well is that we're going to have a fixed contract, cost for legal, instead of the hourly rate, which is what we've been operating.
So we are looking at cost cutting things, and I think your point, Ross, that in a celebratory event, I think would be a wise use of funds, and I don't know that it would cost a whole lot of money to do this, and to really highlight all the good things the town has done in the last 10 or so years.
I agree.
Just wear masks, though.
Yeah.
Just a cursory, to go back to the parcels owned by town, cursory search on the Delta County GIS website shows 31 results, and that includes all parks, parcels, buildings, and everything. So there's, it looks like there's quite a few that are, I don't know what they are, but you have to consider the opportunity cost of giving up those parcels, because they may be valuable now, but they may be very, very valuable in the near or just, far future. They're not renewable, so spend wisely when you're spending money. Please.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask more of a philosophical question about the way we organize our budget, and have done some research and seen other towns where they put all of the salaries, except those in like public works, those would be specific to those enterprise funds, but that any administrative salaries come out of the general fund. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, I don't know when we made the decision that we were going to split salaries between the funds the way we do, but the advantages you see to that versus having salaries in the general fund, just because I know the enterprise fund money is so much more restricted in how it's used.
The allocation procedure that has been developed over the years, from my observation, has been based on data that has been provided by Ms. Jones or the department heads in the respective units in the organization. As an example, Ms. Jones' activities are spread over the entire gamut of services that the town provides. The administrator, basically the same thing. And it's based on those hours of activity. The data I've seen is that they've collected, to give an approximation of how many dollars should be allocated towards general administration, how many should be allocated towards the enterprise funds, how many should be allocated to parks. Mr. Lober looks at the hours of his people and how much is spent on trash, water, sewer, parks, streets activities, and to try to somewhat accurately reflect that in the various expense categories is an art. There's no doubt about it. It's not exact by any stretch of the imagination. And if anybody can come up with a better way to do it, I'd love to hear it. It's hard to do. It really is.
I think
The way I understand it is that it's just like the impact fee on the street, why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. So, it's like, why do you allocate funds? Because that's where the money is. The streets and, the water and sewer have income. General fund doesn't have that much income. So how are you going to pay salaries? Well, this one pays, water and streets pays part of it because we use part of it, and water and sewer. But it's just a way of making it all balance.
So the way I look at it is each of our funds is a business. And it needs, and so I've set up our budget so that each business has its own revenue and its own expenditures. And so, like water, I do an immense amount of my day is spent water, sewer, trash related. And so they, as a business, they need to pay for accounting services, management services, somebody to collect the revenue. So that's why, and we try and do it as close to actual as possible. Now, the world has other plans sometimes, and we think we're going to spend more time dealing with sewer one year, and so we have sewer paying more of the salaries because that's where our focus is intended to go, and then we have a water break, and so all of our energy gets put there. I don't generally adjust. I set the budget and I allocate the salaries for the following year per that budget. I don't adjust it per what happens. And I don't adjust for actual because it's too hard to track. So we set the allocations at the beginning of the year where we intend to put our focus, and that's how it gets allocated. Does that make sense?
That was a great explanation, thank you.
All right, so with 6:12, I would like the board to have at least a little break before we start our meeting. What else do you guys need from us before we adjourn the work session?
So if you can take 3 minutes and tell me how you think it would be most beneficial to you to review the information. What would you like to see first? Would you like to start with general fund, enterprise funds, revenues, expenditures, special? How do you think it would be most beneficial to you to be presented?
Yeah.
I'm responding to Trustee Bear's comment, and I think it was very wise about let's look at what our incomes are going to be in various funds first, and then we can start working from there.
Okay. And personally, last year we went section by section, like we looked at general fund and then we looked at public safety and likewise. And for me, that was very helpful. To take it instead of, here's the revenues for the entire thing, and then we're going to do the expenses for the entire thing. It's too big to get your mind around. And so if we were to take like public safety, here's our anticipated revenue. Then let's look at the anticipated costs that we're looking for in that regard too. Yeah.
What I felt last year we did it that way is that we went through those, and then we got down to the final line of how many fees we're going to have to increase. And by that time, the decision was already made that we're going to have to increase water fees, we're going to have to increase sewer fees to pay these particular salary increases or whatever other increases we had. And, I didn't like that process, to tell you the truth.
I think there's a middle way here that encourages both. Let's look at the income for each area. I think that goes to your point. So we know this is what we're going to take in from the enterprise funds. We know this is what we're going to take in from the general fund. And then we start breaking it down on how are we going to spend by department. Because once you've broken down what your income is, you can break it into the various departments. So you do have to see overall, what are we taking in for sales tax? What are we taking in for property tax? What are we taking in for any kind of fees, fines, forfeitures, grants? I would like us not to assume, just like we did last year, we assumed none of those propositions would pass. We budgeted as if we did not get big increases from the voters. If that happens, great, but we assume they aren't going to pass in our budgeting. And if they do pass, then of course we can change it. But I think that if, knowing first what our projected revenues are, we can break it down like Mary talks about into the different departments. Because we know X percentage of our sales tax goes to parks, X percentage of sales. So if we know what sales tax is, then we can start drawing it out. So I think that's what we're after. We might be talking the same thing.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think that'd be a great way to look at it, revenue by fund. I'm also wondering if there are any fixed costs that could be presented up front so that we know what we actually have to work with in terms of moving money around. So, say we have to put X dollars toward our debt from a particular fund. Let's take that out of the dollars we're looking at in terms of allocating and spending. Does that make sense?
And just one question. When will the county let you know what the expected property taxes are going to be?
It's on your budget sheet. You see your,
It should be that by the end of this month.
preliminary certification values due to the county assessor tomorrow. August 26th.
Okay, so that'll be a big piece of the puzzle,
As Cindy pointed out, last year, or the year before, we had revenue from millage of approximately $100,000. In the ensuing year, with revaluations and all the other things, added property, the certification came back for this year, $140,000. We don't know what it's going to be for this coming year, but I assume it's going to be at least that amount.
well, I gotta believe it'll be at least that, if not more, because I think they do evaluations every 2 years. So approximately half the town or some portion of town was done last year, and the other portion perhaps will be done this year.
You're probably right. I do not know.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing from y'all is that you want to start with the big picture and then we can go down into detail if you find it necessary. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Karen?
What impact would exercising pre-annexation agreement have and annexing properties?
When Mr. Bradford was on the board, he and I had a lot of discussion about it. There are a number of pre-annexation agreements. Obviously, our mill levy is only 8.323 mills. For every 15,000 assessment, they only assess 30% of the estimated value of the property. It wouldn't have that appreciable effect on our total revenue. Cumulatively, it may have a very substantial effect. But I don't know how many properties we have pre-annexation agreements, if we exercise them, to what extent their assessed value will contribute to the
But ultimately, if we intend to expand at all, this is first in one round.
My personal opinion is, I agree.
All right, 6:19, I'm going to close this work session so we can have at least 10 minutes to maybe grab a bite